Today on America's Test Kitchen, Bridget makes the best grilled burger. Dan uncovers the secrets to tender patties. Jack has crisp-tasting Swiss cheese. And Dan prepares thick-cut sweet potato fries. Right here on America's Test Kitchen.
The hamburger is the most iconic of American foods, and part of the reason for that is its simplicity. It's a ground beef patty on a bun. Not anymore. These days, chefs are taking hamburgers to a whole different place. We're here in Cambridge, Massachusetts at Craigie-on-Main restaurant to talk to Chef Tony Mauss about his incredibly popular hamburger.
One of the things that we decided was really important to us was that we wanted to work with really good meat.
Right.
Not just whatever meat, not commodity beef or anything like that. And I think that that's where a lot of people go wrong or get confused. One of the other things you have to battle with a hamburger is the notion of price. Because of what's happened with American culture and fast food, people automatically think of a hamburger as something that's cheap.
Right.
Well, if you work with real beef that I would want to feed to my son, like literally, like that I would trust, then that doesn't come cheap. We're not a burger joint.
Right.
It's not going to be that kind of patty, and it's not going to be $5.99.
So is it grass-fed? Is that what we're talking
So we're
about?
using grass-fed meat. That was something that we always wanted to do. We have skirt steak. We
Right.
might use hanger steak instead sometimes. We have some brisket. We have shoulder.
Right.
And then we've got sirloin, scraps off the sirloin that we serve in the restaurant.
Okay.
And all that goes together to make our hamburger, along with bone marrow and suet. We literally grind our meat every day. We serve it that night.
That's it.
That's it. Done.
This is pretty coarse, huh?
This is pretty coarse. The difference between a hamburger and a sausage is a sausage, the meat is really bound really tight.
Right.
A burger should never be that tight. It shouldn't taste like a sausage, shouldn't eat like a sausage. When you're going to make the patty, you actually don't want to overwork it. It's almost thinking about bread. You gently, gently, gently bring this thing together until it's just sticking.
So how do you cook these things? I assume you don't just griddle them.
We use a low temperature oven. It's called the CBAP oven. It has lots of moisture. So we started in that. And we finished it on our plancha, put some cheese on there, 2-year aged cheddar.
Nice.
And goes on our homemade bun. After we let the burger rest, you've got this fantastic juice
Right.
in that pan. Well, we call it burger vinaigrette. So we toss the lettuce and the onions with the burger vinaigrette, because why would you want to lose that? And voila, the Craigie-on-Main hamburger.
Yeah, that is a good looking burger. All right, here we go.
Enjoy. Not your average burger.
No, that's an awesome burger.
Glad
Wow.
you like it.
Rich, beefy, tender, got some structure.
Sure, and that's a dinner burger.
This is not a snack burger.
No,
This is a dinner burger.
It's like a meal.
Great. Thank you
Perfect.
very much, Tony.
Hey, thank
This
you.
has been great.
It was a pleasure.
This is a burger to remember.
Oh, thank you.
You know this. I hate giving in.
I know you do. You're a
And
bit stubborn.
I'm giving in now and admitting I was wrong. All those years I bought store-bought ground hamburger meats.
Yep.
Right? So now we actually have to grind our own meat. I admit it. You know, it's a little extra work. The only thing I'm asking for you is that I don't want to grind 3 different types of meat.
Okay. So these are some of the cuts that we tested when we were trying to find the perfect grilled burger. These are the 2 ends of the cow. This is the chuck, which is the shoulder, and this is the round, or the rump. This one is really beefy. It's got a lot of flavor, but it's got a lot of connective tissue in there. So we're going to say no to the chuck, and we're also going to say no to the round because it doesn't have a lot of flavor and it will dry out. On the other end of the scale from this is short ribs. You can see that amount of fat, that marbling running through there. Well, it was a little bit too much for us. All right, so finally we have the sirloin cuts. And this is the tri-tip. Great flavor, but it's really hard to find. They don't really sell this too much in a lot of markets nationwide. And then this is flat meat, also known as steak tips. It's got a great amount of flavor. Sirloin has amazing beefy flavor, but it is a little bit lean for our taste, so we're going to have to fix that. So we are going to use this flat meat. This is 1.5 pounds for our burgers. We just want to cut this into about 1/2-inch pieces. We're going to spread this meat out in a single layer on a large plate.
Kind of looks like an art installation.
It does. Andy Meat Hall. Now, I mentioned before that this was a little too lean for us.
I see butter.
That's right.
Yeah.
This is butter. This is 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter that's been cut into 1/4-inch pieces.
You know, if you wanted to take one photograph that just summarized your years here at the America's Test Kitchen, it would be this, right? This plate.
That's true.
Butter on top of flat meat.
That is true. All right, so we can't grind this right away because it'll turn into that paste rather than nice chopped meat. So I'm going to go ahead and stick this in the freezer for about 35 minutes. We don't want it to be rock hard, just a little bit frozen.
Meanwhile, let's go check in with Dan. Dan has done some science about why you really do need to grind your own beef at home for a terrific burger.
Beef is composed of long muscle fibers. You can actually see them here in this flat meat. Now those muscle fibers are wrapped in tough connective tissue. What grinding does is it shears all those muscle fibers into very small pieces that are easy to chew. At the same time, it releases a sticky protein. And this is really important. Those sticky proteins are what allow us to bind a burger together. And this is one of the main reasons you should grind your own beef at home. Here I have some store-bought ground beef. As you can see, it's very finely ground, it's sticky, and it's dense. In addition, it comes very firmly packed in the package. So what you end up with is tough, dense burgers that'll cook up with a mealy texture. Also, you really have no idea what's going into your meat blend. It could be from different cuts and often from many different cows. Now for comparison, I have a pile of beef that we ground here in the test kitchen. It's very loose, it crumbles easily through my fork. This is going to cook up into a burger with a tender, crumbly texture. In addition, because we choose what cut of beef goes into this, we have complete control over fat and flavor. So here I have 2 burgers. This first one made with store-bought beef, and the second one with beef that we ground here in the test kitchen. Now I seared both of these burgers on both sides and finished cooking them to 130 degrees in a 300-degree oven. They rested for about 5 minutes, and now I'm going to drop a 10-pound Dutch oven onto each of them, and we'll see what happens. Now let's take a look at the aftermath. We can see there's a pretty dramatic difference. The burger made with store-bought beef is largely intact. It stood up to the hit pretty well. In contrast, the home-ground burger is completely smashed. Now this is a seriously tender burger. So, by grinding your own beef, you have control over the cuts that go into it, which is going to determine the flavor and fat content of your burger. You control the grind size and how tightly it is packed together. All of that, in the end, will determine how tender and delicious your burger is.
All right, so both the butter and the meat are well chilled. It's time to start grinding it. We don't want to dump all this in at once because it would be really unevenly ground. So we're going to go for about 1/4 of the beef and butter at a time. And then instead of just turning this on and letting it go, I'm going to pulse it, about 15 to 20 pulses. About halfway through, I want to make sure that the meat isn't sticking to the sides. So what we're going to do is toss this with 3/4 teaspoon of kosher salt, and we'll also season this with a teaspoon of ground black pepper, and use a fork just to toss this together. Now we're developing a little bit more of that stickiness, but not too much. So it's time to form these into 4 patties. Just rough division here. And these are about 6 ounces per person. And then we want to gently pat them into a patty. The patty should be about 3/4 inch thick and roughly 4.5 inches in diameter. We want these to be thick enough so that they can stay on the grill longer, so they can get really good char, but not so thin that they overcook. Last step, dimple our burgers.
That's what I was thinking. Like, what is she going to dimple the burger?
Well, we do this often with burgers. You know, when you cook them either in a skillet or on the grill, they tend to go from a nice flat patty into a beach ball.
Right.
That's exactly right. This is going to start this at a much lower point, so when it does eventually rise, it'll be relatively flat. We can't take these right out to the grill right away because they would fall apart on the grill. So what we're going to do is put this in the freezer for about 35 to 45 minutes. And that's going to allow those proteins to set. And also, since it's really chilling down these burgers, they'll be able to spend more time on the grill and get a really good crust. All right, Chris, now comes the magic time that we take those patties that we took a while to make, but they are going to be worth it, and we heat them up on the grill to a nice crust. And you need a really hot fire for that. So let me show you what I did here. This is a disposable pan in there. I poked a few holes in the bottom, about 12, so that way air can circulate through, and then filled the pan with 4 quarts of charcoal. Put the grate on top and let that heat for 5 minutes so it's really good and hot. Okay. But before we add the burgers, I do want to clean the grate. And then just take a wad of paper towels and dip in some vegetable oil. Just run it right over the grate. And if you do this enough, it actually starts to develop a nice non-stick coating. So a little bit more salt, and pepper. And now these are going to go right over those coals. A nice direct sear. There we go. All right, so we're going to let these sit on the grates here for about 4 to 7 minutes until that bottom side gets really nice and crusted and actually starts to release from the grates, because if we started to move it too soon, it could actually stick. All right, so let's check on those burgers. Just take my spatula and gently flip that over. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? That's a nice char there.
You know, you smile most with meat on the grill.
I do.
That's your moment to shine.
So you can see that's developing that beautiful crust. So we're going to let this go another 4 to 7 minutes on that second side. What we're looking for is an internal temperature of about 125 if we want medium rare, or 130 for medium. Chris, these are ready to come off the grill. They've got beautiful color on both sides. So transfer them to a platter. You want to let these rest for about 5 minutes. And then while these are resting, that gives me some time to toast our buns. It's just going to take a minute or two. And then once the buns are toasted, we'll take everything inside. All right, let's serve these up. We have waited long enough. Oh, they're so tender.
Thank you.
There you go. And look at that char.
This was fussy. It was a lot more work than buying it at the supermarket, but now we're going to taste it.
That's right.
That's right. Okay, I was wrong. This was definitely worth a little bit extra time.
I mean, they're really, really beefy, but they almost melt in your mouth.
The secret to great grilled burgers is starting with flat meat, otherwise known as sirloin steak tips. Cut them into small pieces, froze them with 4 tablespoons of butter and small pieces on top, and then ground it in a food processor very quickly. Then form the burgers back in the freezer and then onto the grill. So there you have it, from America's Test Kitchen to your kitchen, the world's best homemade, great grilled burgers. There are many cheeses I take seriously, like Parmesan or Pecorino, even aged cheddar. But when it comes to Swiss cheese, I'm thinking ham sandwich. So I'm here in the tasting corner with Jack to figure out whether there is such a good thing as great Swiss cheese versus not so great Swiss cheese.
I'm here to tell you there is great Swiss cheese, but you need to shop carefully. So you've got 4 samples here, and I've got some basic information about how to shop for Swiss cheese if you really care about good flavor. First thing is you want raw milk versus pasteurized milk. Raw milk has a lot more flavor, and it means that the flavor is coming from the milk as well as the starter culture. Second thing is aging. The really great Swiss cheeses are aged at least a year. The really bad ones are aged 1 day. So you can imagine the difference. There's not a whole lot of flavor in a cheese that's aged a day. You can actually see the aging. I've got some samples here. The aging causes the gas bubbles to form. And try as you might in the sample that I'm pointing to now, there are no holes. You can turn it over every which way and you will see no holes whatsoever. This one has lots of nice big holes. So if you want real Swiss cheese flavor, you need to get something with holes. There's also something you can't see in this. It has something called tears of joy. During the process where those air bubbles are forming, the gases will condense and form these little salty, kind of little crunchy bits. Parmesan does the
Like
same
Parmesan,
thing.
yeah.
And those are called tears of joy. So if you're going to get something for the cheese board, you really want a raw milk cheese aged as long as possible. But if you're going to get something that you're going to melt, unfortunately, that cheese may or may not work as well. The longer the cheese is aged, the more trouble it has melting. And I've got 2 samples here. The one that's closest to me is a nice aged